Another Wednesday's come and gone, and I've got some comics. Let's talk about them. Hey, welcome to 9 Panel Grid. This week, we've seen gaseous villains, hallucinations via hubris, and turmoil in multiversal townships. But we're going to kick things off this week with Absolute Martian Manhunter number 3, written by Dennis Camp with artwork by Javier Rodriguez. Javier is doing fantastic work in this book, and I love this issue in particular, the way he paces things out. The concept behind this issue is that the Martian Manhunter has now kind of like identified the villainous character or creature or manifestation of this series, and it's going to be the White Martian. And what's happening is there are people that are being manipulated, and 24 individuals have set 24 other individuals on fire simultaneously at the same time for different reasons, but you could tell that they had maybe a push in that direction, and that's the manipulation via the White Martian. What happens though is that this book really centers around the fire itself and the destructive qualities of that fire. And he takes the time to, in his paneling, specifically on the very first page, to show the ignition process and fire actually taking hold and coming to a blaze. And it's really cool the way that he kind of takes the time and shows you all of the things that are happening within that fire. The other cool thing that's happening in this issue is that Dennis Camp really plays with the idea of how scary it can be to destroy a concept rather than to destroy a tangible thing. And in this case, we're talking about the destruction of the concept or the notion of home, of the place where you feel safe. That is what the White Martian is going after. The feel good summer book of the year, this is definitely not that. It is seeped in, like, I don't know, depressive qualities, but it also makes it such a worthwhile book to follow along, as our main character, John Jones, is dealing with the fact that now he is kind of like interacting with this extra dimensional being and having to deal with the life and the existence of being an FBI agent that has to see things that normal human beings don't have to see and interact with on a daily basis. This is a really good book. I'm really enjoying what's happening here. The artwork really elevates the words that Dennis is putting forth here with the narrative, and I think it's a totally worthwhile book. Next up, let's talk Absolute Wonder Woman number 8, written by Kelly Thompson with artwork by Hayden Sherman. So Hayden is back on this storyline, and now we're kind of back into the greater story arc of what's happening with Diana, as she and the team of individuals that kind of came together with the destruction of the Tetracide, they're looking to kind of, I guess, formulate a home base, basically, a place where Diana can call home while she's spending her time on Earth as opposed to being in Hell. And it was an okay issue. I think that the best qualities of this book continue to be Kelly's voice for Diana. Her I don't know, her character, her moral character, and her heart are the North Star of this book. And that kind of keeps the character driving forward, and it keeps the level of investment with what she is doing moving forward as well. There's not a whole heck of a lot that really happens in this issue that are extraordinarily exciting. It's really kind of like setting the stage for what comes next with another villainous character that's being introduced, and maybe even an overall organization that could become a thorn in Diana's side here. But we get to see a new interpretation of Dr. Poison that is really, really reminiscent of the character of Johann Kraus in the BPRD books. If you know that, you kind of know where this is going. So it was really cool, but it was more setting the stage than actually pushing the plot forward here. I'm excited to see where they go. It's been an absolutely fantastic book. The voice of Diana is really what's going to draw you in, though. So if you've already picked up these issues previous and you're already along for the ride, this is definitely going to be something that you want to continue along with. All right, for our next issue, we have Assorted Crisis Events number 3, written by Dennis Camp with artwork by Eric Zawadzki. This has been the best issue of the series as of yet. And with it being an anthology series, each issue is going to be a little bit different, but kind of still set underneath the guise and the scope of basically real life people and real life situations dealing with, crisis event level things, the kind of crises that happen within the comics that we know and love. And this one is all dealing with multiversal townships. Basically, we have two existing hearths, the name of the town Hearth. So we have Hearth 1 and Hearth 2, where they're almost on parallel tracks here, but one is just a little bit different than the other, finds its way into destruction at a much quicker pace than the other, and now Hearth 2 has to come over and meet up with Hearth 1. And it really plays with the idea of perspective, because the whole idea of the township in both universes on the onset was love thy neighbor. It was like the picture perfect version of a town that, cares for one another, has each other's backs. But when their, backs are pushed up against the wall and they're dealing with, quite frankly, themselves right in front of their faces, are they truly there for their neighbors, even though knowing that their neighbors are now themselves? Really cool ideas that are being played with here. The back, the setting of this, the multiversal part is really just the stage setting. It's really about the actions that these characters take and kind of the perspective of what is going to happen, if you put yourself in these people's shoes. And I think that Dennis Camp really does a great job at conveying a lot of different viewpoints of what each kind of individual character could and would do in these circumstances. It's another fun issue. It's a little bit deeper and heavier than the first issue. It almost has the same tone, I guess, as the second issue would. It's not shying away from big ideas that kind of take place in the, right through the window of our world here, but it also plays with them through the scope of it still being a comic. And in doing so, it's been incredibly effective. Next up, we have Department of Truth number 30, written by James Tynan with artwork by Martin Simmons. This felt like the midlife crisis issue of the Department of Truth. And I don't mean that in a bad way at all necessarily. What's happening is all of the events that have led us to this place have kind of caused almost rifts within our main players within the Department of Truth, but it's also kind of setting the stage for them to try to do the thing that they think is right in the world. And that's a little bit different depending on who it is that you're speaking with. So our two detectives, they're kind of trying to use now the Department of Truth and the abilities that they know exist in the world for the betterment of the world. Not necessarily the betterment of, kind of keeping things in balance necessarily, but truly looking at the best possible version of what that means and what that could do. All the meanwhile, though, Lee Harvey Oswald, the head of the department, he has his own plans in play here too, and he's been doing this for much longer at this point now. So he's kind of walked in their footsteps already, and he's seen what has happened when he tried to do the most altruistic thing and tried to set, the world and the country and yada, yada, yada up to be the best possible version of what it could be. And it went astray. So now he has a little bit of a different plan that he's going to try to manifest here moving forward. We still don't necessarily know what's going on with the counterparts of all these people, with the other department that they're kind of dueling against. But it is definitely setting us up to see kind of what the plan is going to be moving forward with each one of our players here. It was written in really effectively. I have a feeling of each character's motivation. I think that James did a really good job through the narrative of kind of telling us, here's what the people want, here's how they're going to get it, and here's why they want it to begin with. When Martin Simmons is on this book too, the artistic quality is just soaring. Has a really great quality of the artwork. It's like Ben Templesmith meets Bill Sienkiewicz with a dash of anything. I guess that's the Martin Simmons essence and quality that he brings to it that makes it different than those other two comparisons. Really great issue. I think that this is going to be a bouncing off point here to see where we're going to go in the future. This is kind of like the beginning point of what this new arc could be here, and I have to say it's got me pretty excited. Next up, we have The Goddamn Tragedy number 1, written by Chris Condon with artwork by Sean Kiranuru. This was a pretty cool one-shot. I really liked what this is, and if I had to give an elevator pitch to it, it would be, what if you took the events of The Shining but set it in the period piece of the Gold Rush era? That's kind of what we get here. It's almost like a Donner Party-esque kind of story where this family is on their way to California. They come across a person who sells them a map that's kind of tells them, hey, this way could be treacherous. However, it's going to get you there a heck of a lot faster, and you're going to be able to get to the gold in California way before everyone else that could get there. And it does so by telling the story through the eyes of the daughter character in this family here, who is basically confronting an author and saying, hey, the story that you wrote about my family isn't necessarily true. Here's how everything really played out. So we have the father character who is kind of, he's the patriarch, he makes the decisions, but he hasn't been known to make the best decisions all throughout their lives. And in fact, a lot of these decisions have been basically made through maybe an alcohol tinged tinged glasses, if you will. And you see that kind of play out in this version of the story as well. It's really cool the way that they play with this. You can see the main character being driven into madness, and how a lot of the different events kind of push that forward and forward and forward through hallucinations, through tangible things, the fact that they are starving to death as they maneuver through here because their food supply is completely gone. There's a lot of really cool things that they do here, and it tells a really concise story from start to finish here. That was the best part about this. You get in, you get out, you get the story that you wanted, and it's done so incredibly effective. Chris Condon is really making a name for himself in the comic book industry, at least for me, with a lot of the books that he's doing. And seeing this now, this one-shot original story, it just makes me so happy and excited to see where his career is going to go, because he's got things in the big two, he's got things on his indie side, he's got adaptations, and each one of them are really hitting the mark for me. The artistic quality on this too is very simplistic, but I feel like its simplicity is to the value of the book itself and to the betterment of the narrative as well. Nothing, I mean, it's something that I feel like it gets so easily overwrought, and something that could be so easily, I don't know, put the artwork forward first rather than the narrative, and I feel like that would have been a disservice to the overall story itself. So I think that the balancing act between the story and the narrative totally worked out here. I think the team definitely did a great job at that. So the goddamn tragedy was definitely a contender for one of my favorite one shots this entire year. We have a double dip of Chris Condon this week, so let's talk a Green Arrow number 24, written by Chris Condon with artwork by Montos. So this is the end cap of our first arc by Chris Condon and Montos, and I have to say, they landed the plane in a really great way. This is more of like an issue that kind of gives the culmination of all of the events that have transpired with the Freshwater Killers story arc. The killers have been brought to justice. Oliver is not out there fighting crime necessarily, trying to solve the mystery. The mystery is solved. Now it's really dealing with, where are our main players at? The Freshwater Killer, the one that kind of brought everyone together and kind of started this organization, he's in prison. But how is he dealing with being in prison? Oliver Queen knows that the crime has been solved, but what is his interaction knowing that he was a business owner of the company that really caused all of the turmoil in the freshwater community and ended up poisoning so many of its citizens? How are those two things balancing themselves out, and how is Oliver going to make it right outside of the fact that a killer has been brought to justice now? That's what this issue is all about, and it's done so in a really great way. Again, I think that the best part of Chris Condon's work on Green Arrow so far is that it feels so authentic to the character that was kind of brought forward as a social justice conscious type of person in the 70s when people like Denny O'Neil were writing the character. And I feel like he's bringing that forward again in a really great way. I'm enjoying the heck out of this book. This is, again, a great end cap. It kind of just, it brings it forward in a way that is not just a superhero book. It shows that there's a level of consciousness that these characters within the superhero book have. And that is so appreciated, because I can't say that we get that with each and every big two book that get delivered here. So Chris Condon, again, doing fantastic work on two books this week here. They were just awesome. All right, let's talk Hyde Street number 6, written by Jeff Johns with artwork by Francis Portela. This one really didn't do it for me. This one was a little bit of a stretch of an issue for me. And, I have to be honest, part of that is definitely the artistic change here. Ivan Reis had been the artist on this for most of the previous issues here. So when we get that change, it is a little bit glaring. It's totally noticeable, and it takes you out of the experience. But honestly, that's not the biggest factor for this one. This just felt filler issue from the get-go. We kind of don't have a mission statement for what we were trying to be told with this issue. It was really just kind of like a day in the life of some of these Hyde Street soul-seeking characters. We get to spend a little bit of time with the Boy Scout, a little bit of time with the weight loss guru. We get to spend a little bit of time with the X-Ray Man. But it didn't do anything to push the story forward, and it didn't do anything to make me feel any differently about these characters than I had previously. We know that the Boy Scout is out there just kind of, getting these souls here regardless of wanting to get back to his real life. And we know that that comes at the detriment of people like the X-Ray Man and the, weight loss guru person. But it didn't make me feel any worse for them or better for them or anything. It didn't do anything to make me feel differently about the characters, and it didn't do anything for the betterment of the story. So overall, Hyde Street, this one was a little bit of a downer. All right, next up we have Minor Arcana number 7, written by Jeff Lemire with artwork by Leticia Catanese. So we have to start with that artistic change first, right? Because Jeff Lemire has been the person that's been drawing his own work for the entirety of the series so far until now. But I kind of dig this artwork. It is definitely reminiscent of Jeff Lemire's work, which is very simplistic and very sketchy. This was a little bit more composed, but I gotta say, I was impressed with how cleanly they stayed on the character guides for what Jeff Lemire has put forward with each and every one of the other 6 issues. It was really impressive, actually. I liked it, and it didn't take me out of the experience whatsoever. This issue was all about kind of like developing the relationship between our main character and the husband, who is the husband of her ex, who is a cop in this town that she's returned to. It was kind of heartfelt and charming. I liked the time that they spent together because we know that our main character is keeping everyone at an arm's length here. Anyone that she's cared about in the past, anyone that tries to get close to her, it's not happening. But this character, who should not have broken through, is kind of breaking through now, and it's kind of cool seeing them team up here. And I think that's going to be the driving force of this series moving forward. What they do in this series, though, is that they're starting to, he kind of pulls her in and says, hey, they do this all the time in those cop shows, right? You know, I'm having a hard time with this investigation, so I'm going to call in a psychic. So she reluctantly agrees, and they're looking at these graffiti markings that are popping up all over town that are showing symbology from the tarot cards that she uses in her mother's psychic shop. They don't quite necessarily solve the mystery, but they get to spend time together and they get to understand one another a little bit more. But we also know that our main character has these psychic abilities that are starting to manifest, at time frames that she's not totally controlling. And that happens where she sees a possible future for this cop character and what may be transpiring here within the next days, weeks, months, who knows, basically. But it sets the stage for something that hopefully, maybe, she's going to be able to put a stop to. Time will tell on that, but it gives that hook and it gives that feel of like, hey, there's a mission statement now. There's something that our main character has to work towards to stop from happening. And now it's starting to get exciting. Now the stage is set, basically, and I'm kind of stoked to see the series kind of take that next step here, because it was a little bit meandering recently, but this is putting the focus back on pushing that story forward. That's pretty cool. All right, let's talk The Pale Knight number 1, written by Peter Milligan with artwork by Val Rodriguez. I'm not sure how I felt about this issue. The greater part of the storyline itself here within this issue is all about basically a knight kind of seeking out going back to his family here in a time where the landscape of England was just like riddled with illness and pestilence. It was just sweeping its way across the land. And now he is basically seeing that his family is also affected by this, and he makes a deal with kind of the notion of death itself to basically spare his son, as and he'll give himself up. He'll do whatever it takes, basically. Just, he does not want his son to be, to basically be succumb through this illness. But those events happen within like the last 2 pages of this issue, and the rest of this issue is all about just kind of like going through the depressive nature of this character and his loss of morale and his loss of his feelings for a god entity itself, and his, I don't know, just depression. And I gotta say, the writing on this felt so incredibly indulgent. It was definitely trying to evoke the feelings of a century specific night forward story. So like the dialogue and the verbosity kind of makes sense, but in regard to my, I don't know, level of appreciation for it and my level of excitement as each page turn happens, I gotta say it was kind of a drag until I got to the end of the issue, where it kind of told us what this book is all going to be about. So in that way, for a single issue, and specifically in issue 1, it kind of did itself a disservice. I don't know if I'm going to pick up issue 2 on this one. Time will tell on regards to like when it actually gets released and how many issues come out that particular week. But I gotta say, like, this series already after issue number 1 is completely on the fence for me. Next up, we have Superman number 26, written by Joshua Williamson with artwork by Eddie Barros. This one, again, I feel like we've had a couple issues this week that have been filler issues, and this one kind of fits that bill as well. Overall, in the greater narrative of what Joshua Williamson has been setting up within the pages of Superman, I've been really, really enjoying what's been happening. But this issue didn't really do anything. Lois has lost her powers as the Superwoman, and they've totally reverted. She's not having them recharged by the rays of our yellow sun, and we don't know where they've gone necessarily. Mr. Terrific has investigated, and he doesn't know whether or not they've reverted back to the original owner through the events of what happened in Absolute Power, or if they've just left her and they're out there in the ether. Time will tell. I think we know, considering where the powers actually came from, that it's a good bet that they've reverted back to that person. But it's kind of just setting the stage for that happening in some kind of future arc that will be presented. For this issue, though, we have a confrontation between Clark and Lex, who definitely didn't know what Mercy was up to, considering the events of the prior issue. But they have an argument. Superman is still dealing with the red kryptonite infection that he has, which means that when he gets basically too angry, he kind of gets overpowered and out of control. It's almost like the Berserker Rage for Wolverine, essentially. But that's kind of all that happens. This is really just I don't know, a conversational issue. This is kind of something that just kind of, I don't know, doesn't really do much in any aspect here. It's not a bad issue necessarily, but it's definitely 100% a filler issue. Next up, we have Ultimate Spider-Man number 17, written by Jonathan Hickman with artwork by David Messina. I'm enjoying what they're doing now with the great revelations that have been told here about the nature of Harry's supposed death and what Gwen Stacy has to do with that and how she's maneuvering things basically throughout this entire series from the onset of things. And I gotta say, Gwen Stacy as a character within this Ultimate Universe is awesome. She is so composed. She has plans for plans. She has backup plans for the plans that fail, but she knew that they would fail, so it's all part of her plan anyway. She's a great character, and I'm loving kind of the interactions that she has with other people, all other inner workings that she has within her cabal of characters. I'm trying not to give too much away here, but if you've read the issue, you kind of know what I'm talking about. The other part is that Norman Osborn's shadow looms large over certain characters, and it's just setting the stage for really something terrible to happen in the future. You sense it, you feel it, you knew it through the previous things that were happening here, and it's building upon that again, more so and more so and more so. We don't get to spend a lot of time with Peter and his family in this. In fact, I think we only get maybe a page or two of them. This was really the greater story about Gwen Stacy, and it was appreciated. I really liked them kind of delving more deeper into kind of what was happening all throughout this time frame of her being a character within this book. The only downside I would say is that while I appreciate Dave Messina's artwork on this, and I've liked what he's done in prior issues, I feel like there were times within this issue where the inks and the line work get a little bit too chunky and they get a little bit too, I don't know, too messy, and it really comes to the detriment of the single page experience that we were having. Doesn't happen often, but there's a couple experiences in this issue that kind of just like make you go, whoa, what happened on that one, man? That one looks like maybe it was a rush job. Overall, though, this was a really great issue. It's pushing that story forward. Jonathan Hickman is really developing these characters in a big bad way, and I'm liking every single thing that's happening within this Ultimate Universe. All right, let's talk We're Taking Everyone Down With Us, number 3, written by Matthew Rosenberg with artwork by Stefano Landini. This was shocking. This was absolutely a surprise book for me this week because I enjoyed issue number 1, and issue number 2 kind of brought it up a notch for me, but it was really dialogue specific. I really liked how the characters spoke. It kind of like made it a really, I don't know, enjoyable experience for me, but I didn't think it was special. Issue number 3 felt special to me. I feel like, man, this one really kind of like got its hooks in me from this point on. So we know that one of the villainous characters in this cabal of villainous characters has now kidnapped the daughter, our main player within this book, and the robot who now has the consciousness of her father. And we see really how awesome a character she can be. It was really great seeing her both have a back and forth with the robot character who she doesn't yet understand is truly kind of like the consciousness of her father. And she kind of doles out some big bad truths to him that you could tell kind of affect him in a way, even though he is, this robotic character now. And you also kind of get a better understanding through the eyes of this character what her father was really dealing with and what kind of person he really was. He was part of this organization that were villainous characters, and they all struck uneasy alliances, and now they can see that it's crumbling between all of them. It's really great the way that Matthew Rosenberg kind of lays out all of these things, because that snappy dialogue that we get from issue number 2 is definitely present here. But on top of that, we get Stefano Landini really laying out the pages in a fantastic way here. When they're heavy on dialogue, he uses huge grids to the betterment of the story here. It should be something that could easily be a boring page, but because of the dialogue and because of the snappiness of it, it really makes it balance itself out so nicely. And on top of that, there's huge action set pieces that happen in this. Almost every other page, basically, you get something that's bold and exciting that's happening. And Stefano is really pushing that forward in a great way. There's huge things that are happening in this book. Man, this was like a contender for top pick of the week for me. I was so pleasantly surprised by this, and it really, I don't know, it really makes me happy that, this book is kind of on stands right here and right now. This is something that you should definitely be looking into. It's worthwhile. I'm digging it so much. I'm more curious, though, if you read this, what were your thoughts? Let me know in the comments down below. And with my runner-up pick of the week, let's talk Daredevil Cold Day in Hell number 2, written by Charles Soule with artwork by Steve McNiven. If I'm being honest this week, my top comic of the week and my runner-up, it's basically top comic A and top comic B. I had such a great time with this issue, and it is such a love letter to Frank Miller and everything that he did for comics, and specifically the character of Daredevil. You can tell artistically that Steve is definitely emulating the look and feel of a Frank Miller in kind of a early 90s era when he was working on things like Sin City and Elektra Lives Again. The artistic qualities totally fit the tone and vibe of everything he was doing at that point. And even the coloring on the book is emulating the look and feel of Lynn Varley, who was coloring his work at that time. It's just great. I love what they're doing here. And I can even say that Charles Soule maybe is kind of taking that same tone as well, with his writing aspects, because I'm a huge Daredevil fan. However, I didn't really, Charles Soule's run didn't really resonate with me. I can't say that it was bad, and there were parts of it I really enjoyed. But on the ranking of all of the great Daredevil runs, it's on the lower, tier for me as opposed to the higher. But this totally changes my opinion of that. I really like how, I don't know, everything is kind of flowing and working together here. We have a Matt who was kind of downtrodden, but still, I don't know, open to helping, helping people. He was working in the soup kitchen. We now see that through him becoming Daredevil again, he's reconnecting with Foggy Nelson, and Foggy had a lot of great things to say to him that kind of spell out kind of where they are in this far-flung future world, as it's kind of like the old man Matthew Murdock type of story. It was just fantastic. I loved everything about this. Again, it was the perfect love letter to Frank Miller. If you are a Frank Miller fan, as these two individuals clearly are, this book is going to hit all of those pleasure points for you. And with my top comic of the week, let's talk The Power Fantasy number 9, written by Kieran Gillen with artwork by Casper Wingard. Guys, the bit is not a bit. I swear, this book just gets better and better with each and every issue. And I can't even believe it sitting here and saying it to you. It just really, really does. The way that they're developing these characters and the interactions between these characters continues to shock and stun me in a great way, though, because every time you think you have a grasp on something that might be happening, Kieran pulls the rug right out from underneath you, and there's another big revelation that makes you go, whoa, I don't think I understand the way that this world is working, but I want to know better. And oh my God, what does this truly even mean? That's what we're getting, especially within the last 3 to 4 issues here, as each one has kind of built upon that idea and delivered something really crazy for the world that they're living at, where the atomics are basically nuclear deterrents. There's only a handful of these superpowered beings, and they all keep each other within balance here. What we find out is those balances are definitely being tested now, and they're starting to strike alliances between one another to maybe start making some power moves here. And they all kind of have their ways of manipulating and sidestepping each other's powers here, and we're starting to see that get tested as well. Casper Wingard's artwork on here, and specifically his color palette, just works so well, as it's like there's a pastel quality to it that's kind of muted, but when it needs to get big and heavy, it's not afraid to do so. That really make those big energetic scenes pop off of the page. I don't know what else I can say on this book here besides the fact that it just continues to get better and better and better. It's a really exciting book. It really plays with ideas that I think the big two are kind of afraid to play with here, and that's pretty cool. If you like the idea of superheroes and superpowered beings, but you feel like they're afraid to test them in the big two, you have to check out the Power Fantasy, because it's going to deliver on every single one of those things that you might not even know that you want. So that's what I've got for you this week, but I'm more curious. What did you read, and what were your thoughts? Do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe, and be part of the panel. Leave me a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you next week.